Tell me about Jacob Behrman.
Jacob was born in 1921 in Brooklyn, yeshiva educated. He was wounded at the Battle of the Bulge in World War II. He was missing in action for about 4 months, actually. His family did not know where he was.
Wow.
They found him later on in a hospital in England. When he came back from the war, he rambled around the country, hitching rides on freight trains. And then his family got a message to him that he was needed to help with the running of Behrman House.
This is the Book of Life. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz. If you teach in a Jewish school, you are probably familiar with Behrman House, the longtime publisher of educational materials. At the 2017 Association of Jewish Libraries Conference in New York City, I met with Vicki Weber to learn more about the past, present, and future of Behrman House.
So I'm here with Vicki Weber from Behrman House. So I want to hear all about what Behrman House is doing these days. So fill us in.
Wow, that's a big subject and one that we're very excited about, particularly being an organization in its 96th year of continuous evolution, and the kinds of things we're doing today represent another piece of that evolution. We started in 1921 as Behrman's Jewish bookshop on Lower Fifth Avenue, selling other people's books, selling siddurim, selling menorahs. So it's been quite a dramatic transformation. I would say that right now we're continuing to focus on our education core, and we're doing increasingly thematic, values-based courses, particularly for the congregational school, but we also have a lot of day school interest as well. Our object is to get kids exploring and interested and thinking about why Judaism matters to them. I think in the past, a lot of us focused on ritual and how to do things, but we were very interested in the whys. When the URJ decided to get out of the publishing business, we were very gratified that they chose us to take over their educational materials and to make sure that those stay available for all of the Reformed congregations and even other congregations, unaffiliated and some conservative congregations, do use their materials. And so we have been spending some time not only making sure that those legacy materials are available, but we've also been coming out with some updated editions and revised editions of some of their trade book. Jim Keen's Inside Intermarriage is a book that he just revised recently, and that's coming out this summer. And we also did an updated edition of the very popular Jewish Home, which is used in a lot of Introduction to Judaism classes. Those materials like Mitkadem and the Chai curriculum help us to continue to support the core education, while we are also developing new courses and materials that focus on things like food and Judaism and the environment and Judaism and a lot of other values-based ideas from the people in our biblical heritage. At the same time, we're continuing to work on creating materials for the activated classroom, I guess I would say. The activated classroom. If you look back a couple of decades, people would say that they would walk into a classroom and it would be students sitting with various kinds of pencil-based activities, very quiet, a lot of independent learning. That whole learning model has gone away in the Jewish learning environments as well as in the day school and public school environments. And so in our world today, even a workbook isn't a workbook anymore. A workbook is a place to provide exercises, ideas, games for a classroom. I wouldn't even call it a classroom, a learning space, where the children are coming together. They're working in pairs. They're working in small groups. They're doing little games. They're calling out things to one another. Think of it as a grander model even than Hevruta study. It's very activated and team, and it's driven by these materials. So we just brought out a revision of our very popular 10-minute Hebrew reader, and it contains those kinds of activities where you don't just sit and answer questions on your own. It really provides the basis for a lot of group work and skills development, peer-to-peer work, which everybody finds more enlivening, particularly in the congregational schools where kids, they've already put in a full day in many cases, and so they can use the greater activation.
Right.
So those are a couple of the things that we've been working on.
Let me ask you a question. Mm-hmm. That's definitely the way that the congregational school where I am is going, is trying to be fun and exciting and not just feeling like more school. I'm curious about how you changed paths from, that more traditional, here's the exercises and each student will sit down and study this and get familiar with this content, to this new model of let's give frameworks for group activities and then people can take this and run with it. What caused the change within Behrman House? How did you realize that you needed to do that, and how did you transition?
I would say that this is one more step in a continuous evolution that we are always engaged in. At Behrman House, we pride ourselves in being a true learning organization. We're out there talking to educators all the time. We bring people to our offices, we go out and meet people in their contexts, and we really listen to educators. Plus the pedagogical work that any of us have been engaged in. I've got a master's in religious education from HUC. We have other people who are similarly engaged and involved, and so we bring that to bear. If we go back to Jacob Behrman's time, his impetus for getting Behrman House into the publishing of educational materials was because he was rather dissatisfied with what he saw his own kids using in their religious school. And so I think from then till now, we believe in continuous improvement.
So you mentioned Jacob Behrman, and I'm curious, is there anything particularly interesting about his life story?
Jonathan Krasner at Brandeis wrote about a year and a half ago, he published an entire history of Behrman House under the leadership of Jacob, who ran it from the time he came back after World War II. He was wounded in World War II up until his retirement in the 90s. I think he had vision and taste, and he was interested in being on the forefront, but had no interest at all in fads. And I think that helped him chart a course for materials that had long-lasting use for people.
Give me a little biography. Tell me about Jacob Behrman.
Well, Jacob was born in 1921 in Brooklyn. He was yeshiva educated. He enlisted in the Army at the beginning of World War II, and he was wounded at the Battle of the Bulge. He was missing in action for about 4 months, actually. His family did not know where he was.
Oh.
They found him later on in a hospital in England. And when he came back from the war, he initially decided to take some time off, and he rambled around the country hitching rides on freight trains for a while. And then his family got a message to him that he was needed back in New York to help with the running of Behrman House. His father had started the company in the year of his birth in 1921, and his older sister and some friends of the family had run it during the war. It had fallen on some hard times, and so the family asked their son to come back. I'm not sure that that's the career he would have chosen for himself. He had talked occasionally about being a math teacher. And that's the story. He presided over Behrman House when it was at 1261 Broadway until the mid-1980s, when he realized it was no longer possible to run a warehouse out of the 10th floor of a building in the middle of Manhattan, and so relocated to a small building in suburban New Jersey in West Orange. And then David Behrman moved the company in 2000 to its current location in Springfield. So I think there's a history here of just Behrman House always changing for what's needed now.
Adapting to the times.
Adapting to what educators need.
So when it was founded, it was a bookstore, not a publishing house.
That is correct. And then it started publishing some of its own titles, including a book by Abba Eban on the history of the Jewish people. We published Milton Steinberg's As a Driven Leaf, published Eugene Borowitz, published Neil Gaiman, a lot of people who were important. The house continued to carry other publishers' materials up until the time it left Manhattan, and then they closed down the bookstore part. It never had a retail store. It was always up on the 10th floor. But in the move to New Jersey, it was decided that that part really wouldn't continue to be as easily supported. It used to be a place where rabbinical students from JTS and HUC would come and hang out and lie on the couch. There were these stories of Gene Borowitz on his way to Penn Station from HUC, coming in and hanging out with Jacob and napping on the couch. He was quite a force at Behrman House for a long time. He and Jacob were very close friends. He and Gene worked together quite a bit, telling educators about the kinds of projects that Behrman House was working on.
Now, am I recalling correctly that Behrman House also offers an online program for students?
We got into digital educational materials, I'm going to say now it was 15 years ago, originally with CDs for skills reinforcement in Hebrew, particularly at the primer level. All technology is transitional technology. So we started with the CDs, and that sort of was morphed in more recent years to our online learning center, which was originally a computer-centered educational space where educators could set up a class and make available to their students a variety of both primer level and higher level Hebrew, mostly liturgical Hebrew. Now we are morphing again to include more mobile platforms. So now we're in the App Store. And I'm sure that there'll be something after that, but right now our commitment is to make things as seamless and as available as possible using the mobile devices. And also, I think what's really exciting about being in an online space is that we can use a variety of multimedia materials to really address lots of different modes of learning. We have last year introduced a new prayer program called Hebrew in Harmony that intertwines audio and video and games that teachers can use with all of their students in a classroom setting, or allow students to have independent access to do more work at home or work in small groups, but to really get access to a lot of different modalities. They can see the words while they're hearing the music, and it's all linked together. So that part is really exciting. And I think that there's even more to be done with gamification and some other kinds of methods.
Can you talk a little bit about your children's imprint, Apples and Honey?
We decided a couple of years ago to investigate the children's market. We now have 27 titles. They're just luscious. I'm the person who calls on places like Barnes & Noble to introduce them to our books. And just last month, I was talking to one of the buyers, and they have a new section in some of the Barnes & Noble stores specifically for Judaic titles, which I think is very exciting. They haven't had that before. It's a new program there. And she said that the Apples and Honey titles are some of the most beautiful books she's ever seen in the Jewish arena. So we're very proud of them. We have some coming out for the fall, one by Rabbi Zoe Klein, who is the spiritual leader of Temple Isaiah in Los Angeles. And she has written this adorable and fun book called The Goblins of Nottingham, A History of Challah. And it creates its own midrash, really, about where might challah have come from. And she tells a story of goblins who tangle children's hair, and the children rise up and work together to try and figure out how they're going to thwart these three goblins. It's a fun and sort of crazy fairy tale story that she just did a beautiful job with. Rabbi Barry Schwartz has written a book called Adam's Animals. It takes the Bible verse from Genesis about how Adam named all of the animals. It's this beautiful, luscious alphabet book of animals. Some of the animals we've all heard of, and some of them we've never heard of. And they're all real, and they're all beautifully illustrated. And it's very touching because it also introduces Eve in a very lovely way. It's just a gorgeous and appealing book. Our executive editor, Dina Neusner, has done a very fine job of marshaling resources both in the U.S. and in Israel. We have an Israeli partner in this also. We have a freelance editor based in Israel. We've got our own home-based editor, Ann Kofsky, who also serves as the art director. This team that Dina has put together has really created some remarkable, remarkable books.
So are there any other activities that we haven't talked about that Behrman House is engaged in?
Well, we started last year with a line of coloring books. First one was Shalom Coloring, Bible Designs for Contemplation and Calm. It was a big hit. It actually was all sold out before I even had books in the warehouse. And we followed it up with a Shalom Coloring that was specifically from Bible stories. And this fall, we will be introducing animals of the Bible in mandalas. And they're just beautiful designs. And then our fourth book in our series is not called Shalom Coloring. It's called Oy Vey, a Yiddish coloring book. And it takes a number of fun Yiddish expressions. The author has a joke for each one. It's very Catskills and adorable. We got the first copies in a few weeks ago, and people were literally laughing out loud as they were thumbing through this coloring book. So we think it will be a lot of fun for Hanukkah. Dr. Ruth Westheimer was interested in doing a memoir, and so the book is a graphic novel about Dr. Ruth's early life and the resilience that she created in her life that's filled with a lot of really hard stuff. Being orphaned, being put on a Kindertransport, landing in Palestine as a very young girl and being trained as a sniper, and then eventually making her way to the U.S., getting work as a maid, and ending up putting herself through graduate school and becoming a TV personality. I mean, it's just a remarkable book, and it's told in this beautiful graphic novel that we're very excited about. It's coming out next spring.
And who's the graphic artist working with her?
His name is Mark Simmons. And we also are working more on books that can be used in affinity groups within congregations. For parents, there's The Joys and Oys of Parenting. It's a child development specialist and a Jewish educator. And it really demonstrates how what we know about child development is backed up by what we know from our ancient traditions in Judaism.
Oh, what nice validation.
And it's wonderful. And it's put together with this terrific discussion guide at the end. So it works very nicely for parenting groups or for book groups. And it follows on a book we brought out a couple of years ago by Rabbi Rachel Cowan and Dr. Linda Thal called Wise Aging, which has been used in groups across North America now for how do we confront this later third of our lives in a generative fashion. Anyone who picks it up, even some of us who feel we're not quite ready to think about that, we look at it and say, wow, this really is also for me. Mm-hmm. And then the third one in that, it's not really a series, but it feels as though it's coming together as a series, is Jim Keen's Insight into Marriage, which he's revised to really look from a Christian partner's perspective of what it's like to raise Jewish children in a Jewish environment and the kinds of decisions one makes, the kinds of issues one confronts, told from a very personal point of view, but also in a way that invites a group of people to sit and examine their own experiences and reflect on their own experiences. So I think what we're trying to do at Behrman House is to see all of this as learning across a spectrum, and some of it is for adults and some of it is for kids and some of it is learning through fun. I mean, it's always nice to have some fun.
Well, the theme that seems to be coming through is flexibility, so that's great. Vicki Weber, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been like a trip down memory lane, but I just appreciate the opportunity.
Great, thank you.
Hi, this is Rich Michelson. I am the author of The Language of Angels, a story about the reinvention of Hebrew. and I'm looking forward to joining you shortly on The Book of Life, one of my favorite podcasts. And my episode is dedicated to Neil Waldman, and if you listen in, you will find out why.
If you enjoy the Book of Life podcast, please become a patron at patreon.com/bookoflife. Leave a review on iTunes or a comment on our blog at bookoflifepodcast.com. You can also like our page at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast. Follow us at twitter.com/bookoflifepod. Email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida at cbiboca.org and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening and happy reading.